Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. And this episode we're going to be talking about Gladiolus. Now I could sit here honestly and just say yes you should. I could. But I've made that joke before, and for fear of making a joke a little bit stale, I'm not going to do that today. Instead, I'm going to explain to you exactly why Gladiolus is as hyped up as he is, and why you probably should consider pulling for him, as well as going over his Lufenia event and the various other characters you could take along with you, even if you're not necessarily or can't pull for Gladiolus. So if that's all stuff that you're interested in, then stay tuned and keep on watching. As always guys, don't forget to check all of my links in the description box below for all my social media, so Twitter, Twitch, Discord and Patreon. Twitch this week, well, we're coming up to the end of the week now, but I will be streaming Final Fantasy XIV every Sunday as I always do. I'm always streaming Final Fantasy Count Up on Friday nights, and of course I will be streaming every event as it goes live for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, including Gladiolus of course. On Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Strike Noir. Thank you ever so much for your support. I want to extend a massive thank you to each and every one of my patrons, because quite frankly, given the situation with quarantines and everything in the UK, you guys have honestly just kept me going in ways you don't even know, so thank you very much for that. And if you would like a title card, just like Strike Noir has down here, as well as being involved in the Would You Pull portion of the videos and monthly benefits such as voice chats with me, etc., then perhaps consider becoming a patron yourself. Don't forget to check out all of the links around me in the description box below for websites relating to Opera Omnia, and of course don't forget to check out all of the content creators out there besides myself. So let's start by taking a dive into DissidiaDB.com here and having a look at why Gladio is quite as hyped as he is. Now his banner mates are Sabin and Vayne, as well as Kuja's Burst is still available here. And Sabin was a character that I know a couple of people are massive fans of, but at this point in time he's very outdated. He does have Imperil in his kit, but that's pretty much the main reason that you'd want to use him. And even Vayne, who was like at the top of his game for a very long time, he's still mildly usable now, but at this point in time we're starting to get away from the point where EX only characters are particularly usable unless they've been very recently released. But Gladiolus is the star of the show here, so let's take a look at exactly why he's as hyped up as he is. Now, Tempest and Dawnhammer. Tempest is a 4-hit AoE bravery split HP damage attack with 150% brave overflow after you've put 15 CP weapon and the crystals 55 into it. That gives you a particular buff called King Shield. And now King Shield is a tanking ability that's unique to Gladio in that it is a cover ability similar to Galoof, but instead of evade tanking, he just takes the hits. Like, Gladio will just take the hits with King Shield and Royal Guard as well. He also, takes less bravery damage, less HP damage, and King Shield actually levels up every time he takes a hit, and he's going to be taking a hit because as long as his allies have the King Shield buff on them, then he's going to be able to cover for them and then just be able to take the hits as much as he wants. And then he also gets these level ups where he's raising his own max bravery and attack every time he gets hit by something. He also gains a stack every time he uses Tempest as well, but you don't typically want to be using Tempest to just get a stack of King Shield. You shouldn't need to. And you're going to be able to get attack and max bravery while you're at it. So basically, it's a half-decent hitting attack. It's not the strongest attack in the world, but that's not really what Gladio's necessarily designed for. It does actually hit pretty hard with some of his other stuff, though. But it does basically cover damage without inflicting a debuff on the enemies, and this is actually very important as well, because there are a lot of enemies that are resistant to tanking because they are immune to lock, or they cleanse lock very, very frequently. So characters like Warrior of Light and also on 8 and characters like that get warded off by the fact that they are immune to the lock debuff, whereas Gladio never actually inflicts it in the first place. He's just buffing himself and his allies, so he doesn't actually need to worry about it too much. And then Dawnhammer is a 6-hit AoE bravery damage, but a single hit HP damage attack with 180% brave overflow after everything's all been factored in. And this also gives him the Pride of the Crown's Guard buff, which again increases his max bravery and his attack. It also inflicts a max bravery debuff as well. That's not a weak one either. And the other thing to note is that he also batteries the party, including himself, because he's a tank and he wants to battery himself if he's taking damage, with pretty much every single move he has. So he's getting it from Dawnhammer, he's getting it from Tempest, he's also going to be getting it from his HP Plus, and his EX, and his LD, so literally everything he does, except for his C65, which heals him and gives max bravery to the party, but even then, that you're using that for the free turn anyway. Everything he does batteries the party. He also has Last Stand, which is obviously going to be very, very helpful to any tank. You're going to want Last Stand on anything you've got there. And then he also gets a HP plus and a Bravery plus that he gets from having just his C60, but it gets stronger when you go looking at his EX and his LD. So now let's take a look at his EX and his LD, which are obviously the things you're going to be pulling for when it comes to Gladiolus, generally speaking. Now, Maelstrom is a great attack, generally speaking, but without going into the plus versions of it, then I'm not going to talk about the Brave HP aspects just yet, but I'll tell you now, it's actually very hard hitting. But it also batteries the party, like everything he does, and he also gives himself 8 turns, once you've put Power Stones and everything in, of another buff called Trial of Gilgamesh, or Warrior's Trial, or sometimes it might end up being different. Before an event comes out in the global version, sometimes these names are subject to change, so do forgive me if it's not necessarily correct. But it will also, on top of the max HP, attack and max bravery auras he already provides to the party just with his passives, he's now giving another party buff of attack and max bravery overflow, which also increases every time a Gladio receives an attack. And this gets up to 40% on Brave Overflow limit and attack on top of everything else. And not only that, but he's now providing HP regen on top of it as well, up to 20% at the beginning of each party member's turn. Which is fantastic, because he's now covering bravery damage and taking HP damage onto himself. He's covering everybody. We haven't even got to the LD yet, and now he's like providing party auras for all the right stats, including Brave Overflow, and he's got HP regen for a pretty hefty amount as well that's going to be consistently active because it's tied to his EX. And when we go looking at the EX Plus version, it gains splash damage, so that's obviously nice as well. And you start the fight with Pride of the Crownsguard, which is a buff you get from his skill 2, Trial of Gilgamesh, which is the buff that he gets from his EX, and a free skill use on the first turn, so typically you would use his skill 1, so that he has his cover buff, his attack aura, and his own attack and max brave aura that gives him access to his Brave Attack Plus and HP Attack Plus, all on turn 1, which is fantastic, and it gives him like a way to just get started in the fight. But at 3 out of 3, it becomes a triple HP dump attack with 4 hits between each one that gain bravery between each attack in a similar way to how Kuja's does. Obviously, it's not as hard hitting quite as Kuja's, but not really anything is at this point in the game. And you're also going to get a Brave Attack plus and an HP Attack plus, which are a party battery, because everything he does is a party battery. And then his HP plus is a 2-hit Brave HP that he gains bravery before he hits, and it raises party bravery, including his own, after the damage is dealt, so he's then that much harder to break. And given that his King's Shield buff makes it so he takes a significantly smaller amount of bravery damage, and he's just not taking damage. It's like, we haven't even looked at his LD, which is the thing that you really, really want, and he's already looking pretty good. But let's enter the Blade of Renea and Impulse. So this is, actually, to be fair, everything Gladio does is why he's as hyped as he is. But this is the icing on the cake. So we have an 8-hit AoE Brave HP attack, which is split damage. But again, Gladio's not necessarily there to deal damage. He batteries the party with it after he's dealt damage. And he also gets 3 turns of Perfect Guard. Now, Perfect Guard is no damage to Gladio whatsoever, whether it be bravery damage or HP damage. He gains debuff evasion rate 100% as well, so he can't be debuffed during this time. And he's obviously already covering all of his party members. So your party cannot take damage during this point in time, apart from through AoE damage. So even if they are taking AoE damage, he's got HP regen, so they're all recovering from that. But basically, the reason you want this is because you want it to protect yourself from really scary attacks. And this ability, before I even go into the counter-attack portion of this as well, allows you to just survive. And he's doing a decent amount of damage while he's at it. Because not only is he getting all of that, he's also now countering all Brave HP attacks that he takes, which he's going to be taking because he's covering his party members a lot, with a 3-hit Brave HP attack that has 50% splash damage, raises party bravery again, and he also inflicts a framed debuff that reduces their attack and their defense by 40%. It's a lot. Like, Gladio has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, considering that it's all bundled into one character. He's got the bravery batteries, like, for days, like, literally everything he does. He's got the HP regen, healing. He's got the covering, which obviously he's a tank and he doesn't require the debuff, which means that he's going to be useful for a significant number of Lufenia clears and other hard content. He's got Perfect Guard, which allows you to literally write off certain bosses and certain attacks, including, in some cases, including this event, the Lufenia attacks. So you've got loads of that going. And he's dealing a significant amount of damage with his EX and his counter attacks at the same time. He's got max bravery and attack and defense debuffs. He's got party auras. There's not an awful lot that Gladio doesn't have, and it's very, very difficult to not just go on and on about just how great this character is. Now, the last thing I will mention before we move on to artifacts and high armor is that you do only get 3 uses of this LD. Thank God, because if you got 4, it'd be really crazy. But 3 uses of this LD, so you're gonna need to time this correctly. So you want make sure like he's not too fast for the enemy, so that he's actually taking the hits. But you can use this to counter so many different things that like you just have to know when to time it. But moving on to his artifacts and his high armor. Artifacts, give him attack. Give him attack, it helps everything he does. Obviously, he's got counters, he helps his EX attack, it helps everything he does. Straight up give him attack. But honestly, with his tanking capabilities and the fact that he does actually take HP damage a lot of the time, giving him his survival skills and raising his max HP by 15% per artifact, that's a heck of an increase in his HP. So that is definitely one to consider. You could possibly go for max bravery if you wanted to, but I actually agree with the highlights that are on here and go with the max HP. In terms of high armor, this is actually quite difficult because I think that the bulletproof suit, his high armor, has the worst keystone currently available, which is increases his bravery gains by 5%. It's nothing, realistically. But some people will probably pick this up purely for the damage break limit, etc., because they're going to use Gladio in so much content. So I personally will probably not pick up Gladio's armor, even though he's a must-have character, because I would rather save it for someone who needed their high armor to be better, whereas Gladio, like I've said a couple of times, he's not there to break the damage cap necessarily. He's there to provide protection for your party and amongst everything else. But I don't think he needs this. Like, I think having the extra 500 damage on, or the extra 1,000 damage or 10,000 damage on his HP is fine, but like if you're taking him with other batteries, etc. But the effect is just so poor in my eyes, and it does get better like later down the line. Like all of the keystones get improved much later on. But for now, I would recommend against grabbing Gladio's high armor. So now let's take a look at the Lufenia event itself that you're going to be taking Gladio should you pull him, or if you're going to choose not to pull him, the other characters you could take along with it. Now, in the Lufenia mission, you're going to be taking on a pair of Optimuses, which are the turret guy, a variation on the turret robots that we've seen plenty of. But what these guys do is they just do a lot of very frequent brave HP attacks. Basically, they require some sort of tanking or HP damage mitigation for you to get through it. Now, the Lufenia orb in this particular mission, now normally you'd be finding ways to get around it by making it tick up or freezing it, etc. And in this one, you can't. You kind of just have to take the Lufenia attack. Basically, what you're supposed to be doing here is tanking all of their biggest moves. So they have a recast attack that self-cleanses, so they can't be locked. They actually are immune to a lock anyway, as well as attack down, but they self-cleanse any nasty debuffs they have, so HP silence, etc. They then use a brave HP attack on whoever has the lowest health. They always target the person with the lowest health with both the Lufenia attack and the recast attack. So they want to, like, basically you need somebody to stop that character from dying. It can't be dodged, so none of their biggest attacks can be dodged, so edge isn't going to help you here. And the recast attack actually does a large number of debuffs as well, so attack down, defense down, speed down, initial brave down, max brave down, and poison. And on top of that, they actually have an attack where they have an aura that changes color, and you need to be cautious of this, because if it's green, then they're going to start using HP attacks even more frequently than they already do, and if it turns red, then they get a really nasty, heavy Brave regen, so you're going to want to be able to shave that off as well, on top of everything else as well. Now, in terms of the characters that you want to take for this, if you are, for whatever reason, not pulling for Gladio, you don't have to have him in order to do this, but trust me, he makes this significantly easier. Because, I mean, the orb appears at certain thresholds of HP, and then you just have to deal with the attack one way or another. And they appear when they go under 80%, 50%, and 40% HP. So they gain the orb 3 times. Oh, how convenient. Gladio happens to have 3 uses of his LD. So you can get around it that way, but if you're not taking Gladio, you can take Ardyn. Like I said, they always target the character that has the least health. Ardyn's all pretty much usually got 0 HP the majority of the time. So if you don't want to take Gladio, take Ardyn, because he's immortal anyway, and they're going to just try and smack him, and they'll be like, well done. If you don't necessarily want to take Ardyn, you could take Warrior of Light, although just be careful because, like I said, they are immune to lock, so you want to be cautious of that. 9, Porum, anyone who has very heavy HP damage reduction, like Porum in particular, if you use her Mysidian Brilliance at the right time, then you can give them a very large HP damage reduction, or whoever's being targeted, so just be cautious of that. You have other options, and then damage dealers, just take your heaviest damage dealer. If you've got Kuja, he's still synergy for this. If you've got Gao and Gladio, one of my favorite things about Gladio is that he actually works alongside other tanks and other characters that have counterattacks and things like that, because he doesn't rely on lock, and so therefore he doesn't take it away from characters like Warrior of Light, or he doesn't stop Gao from going off because of evasion tanking and things like that, like 8 does. He doesn't necessarily work all that well with 8, because 8 doesn't counter if he doesn't get hit. But there are a lot of characters that Gladio actually does work with that you wouldn't expect him to. So you can take multiple tanks to this if you want to, but, you know, just be cautious. Last stand characters are another option for you as well. If you want to try and sort of suck up the damage and then heal it back off again, you've got characters like Garnet. Like, I've got examples here that the Tombury Troop and Rem have both posted as well, because I always want to make sure that people are going to those websites and checking them out, because they help me out as much as anybody else. But characters like Garnet, you can try and soak up the damage and then Holy Prayer all the health back up again so that she gains the health back. There's actually quite a lot of options here for you, but given that 99% of people who are watching this video are probably going to be pulling for Gladio anyway, you're just going to take him. So now we come to the, well, not really that big a question of whether you should pull for Gladio on his banner. Now, quite frankly, I struggle to think of reasons not to pull on this banner. His banner mates are, I mean, if you've not got Vayne is usable in a lot of sort of mid-level content now. Like, he absolutely decimates a lot of mid-level content. He's not so great now for the Lufenias. He can be usable in this because obviously he has so many free turns that he like doesn't take Gladio's 3 turns away from his perfect guard, so you can force the countdown of the orb using Vayne if you wanted to do that. Sabin, I know that there's fans of Sabin out there, but he's really not that great at this point in time. And if you haven't pulled Kuja's Burst already, then this is a great place for you to try and get it. I mean, for me, it's not a case of whether I'm wanting to pull for Gladio or not. I'm going to have this character's LD one way or another. The only question for me is how I'm going to pull for Gladio, because originally I was kind of anticipating having to pull for Kuja's Burst at the same time, but he was really lovely to me in during Gao's Lost chapter, so I don't have to do that anymore. So would you chance, like, maybe try a few tickets, try and get Gladio's LD and then token the rest of his kit? Or would you just go for gems anyway because he's just that damn good? Let me know in the comments below. If you were in my position where I already had Kuja's Burst and I still needed Gladio and everything that comes with him, but I had enough tokens to get everything but the LD, would you pull with tickets or would you still go straight in with gems? Because I'm kind of weighing up my options and I'd like to hear what you guys think. But honestly, the only reasons I can realistically think of to not pull on this banner for Gladiolus is because, well, you either just really just don't like Gladio as a character, or you really dislike characters that are considered like top tier and you like to like challenge yourself with that. But the fact of the matter is that Gladio is so usable for a very, very long time. Like, he's still usable in JP now. Like, we're talking 8-9 months in advance. He's still usable then. And he hasn't even had his LD boards yet. And quite honestly, I can't imagine he's going to get all that much from them. Because while we've seen that some of the other tanks, like Warrior of Light, are getting like these massive upgrades, if Gladio's still able to kind of hold his own 9 months from now, doesn't that kind of speak for itself? So now it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, can let your views be known on whether or not you plan on pulling on any particular banner and give your reasons why. Now, I think it's fairly obvious what people are going to say when it comes to this particular banner. The majority of people are leaning yes when it comes to Gladiolus. 77% of my patrons who voted said that they were going in with gems on this one. 21% said they were going in with tickets, and just 3% of people said they weren't pulling on this banner at all. So totally the opposite to how Gal was last time. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get any comments from the people that said no. I had a couple of people said that they were okay with not getting him with tickets, but no one, like, coming forward and telling me why they weren't pulling on this banner. But Patch 793 says, I originally said I was going to go gems, but I'm starting to lean more towards trying to ticket his LD, seeing as we get the 15 CP free, and I have more than enough weapons and weapon and EX tokens to get the 35 in EX weapons. Also, because Gal was nice and drops Kuja Burst, so I don't need to try for that anymore, if nothing shows up after a decent amount of tickets, I'll switch over to gems because I'd have to have that tank. Well, this is pretty much the same situation that I'm in. So honestly, like I said, let me know in the comments below, what would you do in that situation if all you need was Gladio's LD and you have a large number of tickets? Do you run the risk of pulling tickets, or do you just skip that entirely and just go in with the gems? I mean, most of the comments I got were very similar to what Iabrea says here, which is not even going to elaborate, it's Gladiolus. And then Jamba Juice says, as much as I hated 15 personally, it's Gladio, resources be damned. So even people who don't even like Gladio or don't even like 15, they're still going to be pulling for Gladio. Sad Panda says, absolutely going all in for Gladiolus, but I'm really wrestled with the choice of gems or tickets. I'm trying to reserve my gems for must-have carriages that have a burst, but because of its extreme longevity, I think I'll make an exception. Plus, I've just topped up my tickets with Bahamut, and I'd hate to burn through them all right away. Again, same issue I'm having. Striking here says, I am pulling because he's simply one of, if not the most worthwhile units to pull for if we have ever had. If you can afford to pull and get his whole kit, then you should. The only reasons not to pull are if you don't have enough resources, or if you're one of those hipsters that doesn't pull for busted units. One thing I'm going to say here is if you are lacking in resources and you can't pull for Gladio, don't panic. I mean, honestly, we've just had Bahamut, so you've had an insurgence of resources, and if you're going to put them anywhere, here is a great place to put them. But if you genuinely can't pull for Gladio, there are going to be other characters that you can use in the future. But it stands to reason that a character like this, with this much longevity, this much utility, and just the survivability, there's a lot of abilities going on there, it's so hard to pass him up. So that's going to be it for today's video. Let me know in the comments below how much resources you're spending on Gladiolus rather than whether you're pulling for him or not. And if you're not pulling for Gladio, I really want to hear why. I really want to hear what your reasons are for not pulling for Gladiolus, because as you can see, 99 or 97% specifically of the people who have voted in the Would You Pull, and 90% of, or a very large majority of the player base is going to pull for Gladio. So I would love to hear in the comments below why you are not pulling for him if you're deciding not to. And obviously don't forget to like the video, share it out to anyone else who plays Opera Omnia. Click that bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's one of those things that I just churn out at the end of every video because every content creator is supposed to do it. And of course, enjoy Gladio if you manage to pull him, and good luck if you are, and obviously all that good stuff. So thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. So take care.